Hello, good evening. My name is Richard Stibbard, and tonight I'll be reading a story about Rumpelstiltskin, that famously wretched imp who many of us know from the old classic tale that bears his name. This story reveals what happens when Rumpelstiltskin does what any creature famed for their high temper should do, and what Rumpelstiltskin himself should have done long ago. Now, if this story is new to you, perhaps you've never heard about it, fear not and sit tight, for we begin our story at a sad old time, when Rumpelstiltskin was ill-tempered and unhappy without hope. But as we shall see, he just may find the stuff of inspiration in the simple power of his own breath. But before we begin, let's take a few moments to calm the mind and relax the body. Cozy up under the covers in a restful position, feeling the bed absorb the weight of your body. Do your best, if you can, to free your mind from all the worries and troubles of the day, for tomorrow is another day. But right here and right now, it's time for you to relax and be calm. So now, snuggle in and close your eyes as we begin tonight's story. Once there was a miller who was poor but had a beautiful daughter. Now it happened that he had to go and speak to the king, and in order to make himself appear important, he said to him, "I have a daughter who can spin straw into gold." The king said to the miller, "That is an art which pleases me well. If your daughter is as clever as you say, bring her tomorrow to my palace, and I will put her to the test." And when the girl was brought to him, he took her into a room which was quite full of straw, gave her a spinning wheel and a reel, and said, "Now set to work, and if by tomorrow morning you have not spun this straw into gold during the night, you must die." Thereupon he himself locked up the room and left her in it alone. So there sat the poor miller's daughter, and for the life of her could not tell what to do. She had no idea how straw could be spun into gold, and she grew more and more frightened until at last she began to weep. Down in the woods there lived a temperamental imp called Rumpelstiltskin. He was known as an unfriendly person who would always grumble about with concerns of this or that. But this man was one of those rare creatures who could actually spin straw into gold. When he heard the story of the maiden, he seized the opportunity. So Rumpelstiltskin visited the castle and proposed to do just that. He would help the maiden to spin straw into gold, but only under a very selfish condition. "Good evening, Mistress Miller," Rumpelstiltskin greeted. "Why are you crying?" "Alas," answered the girl, "I have to spin straw into gold, and I do not know how to do it." "What will you give me," said the mannikin, "if I do it for you?" "My necklace," said the little girl. The little man took the necklace, seated himself in front of the wheel, and whir, 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 3 turns, and the reel was full. Then he put on another, and whir, 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 3 times round, and the second was full too. And so it went on until the morning, when all the straws was spun, and all the reels were full of gold. By daybreak the king was already there, and when he saw the gold he was astonished and delighted. But his heart became only more greedy. He had the miller's daughter taken into another room full of straw, which was much larger, and commanded her to spin that also in one night, if she valued her life. The girl knew not how to help herself, and was crying when the door opened again, and the little man appeared and said, "What will you give me if I spin that straw into gold for you?" "The ring on my finger," answered the maiden. The little man took the ring, again began to turn the wheel, and by morning had spun all the straw into glittering gold. The king rejoiced beyond measure at the sight, but still he had not gold enough, and he had the miller's daughter taken into a still larger room full of straw, and said, "You must spin this too in the course of this night. But if you succeed, you shall be my wife." Even if she be a miller's daughter, the king thought, I could not find a richer wife in the whole world. When the girl was alone, the mannikin came again for the third time and said, "What will you give me, mistress, if I spin the straw for you this time?" "I have nothing left that I could give," answered the girl. "Then promise me, if you should become queen, to give me your first child." She sat quiet for a few moments, not knowing how else to help herself. After thinking and talking to herself for a while, to the imp's surprise, the girl agreed. She promised the mannikin what he wanted, and for that he once more spun the straw into gold. And when the king came in the morning and found all as he had wished, he took her in marriage, and the pretty miller's daughter became a queen. A year after, she brought a beautiful child into the world, and never gave a thought to the mannikin. But suddenly, in a warm evening, the imp came into her room and said, "Now give me what you promised." The queen was horror-struck, and promised the mannikin all the riches of the kingdom if he would leave her child. But the mannikin said, "No, something alive is dearer to me than all the treasures in the world." Then the queen began to lament and cry, so that the mannikin pitied her. "I will give you 3 days' time," said he. "If by that time you find out my name, then shall you keep your child." An empty bargain that he knew she could never fulfill. So the queen thought the whole night all the names that she had ever heard, and she sent a messenger over the country to inquire far and wide for any other names that there might be. When the mannikin came the next day, she began with Caspar, Melchior, Balthazar, and said all the names she knew, one after another. But to every one the little man said, "That is not my name." On the second day she had inquiries made in the neighbourhood as to the names of the people there, and she repeated to the mannikin the most uncommon and curious names. "Perhaps your name is Short Ribs, or Sheepshanks, or Lace Leg." But he always answered, "That is not my name." On the third day the messenger came back again and said, "I have not been able to find a single new name, but as I came to a high mountain at the end of the forest, where the fox and the hare bid each other good night, there I saw a little house, and before the house a fire was burning, and round about the fire quite a ridiculous little man was jumping, dancing, and singing. Tonight, tonight, my plans I make. Tomorrow, tomorrow, the baby I take. The queen will never win the game, for Rumpelstiltskin is my name." The queen sighed with relief. You can imagine how glad the queen was when she heard the name. The following day she met the imp with confidence. "With your deceitful heart," she exclaimed, "you will never win." At first she said, "Is your name Conrad?" "No." "Is your name Harry?" "No." "Perhaps your name is Rumpelstiltskin." "The devil has told you that! The devil has told you that!" cried Rumpelstiltskin. So frustrated he became at his lost gamble, he gnashed his teeth and crossed his brow, and in anger he plunged his feet until the earth itself shook with his fury. Indeed, he stumped so hard that he disappeared down into a great chasm. The queen was so dumbfounded and in disbelief at having just seen Rumpelstiltskin disappear into a chasm in the earth. But he seemed to be long gone, so she returned to the castle and did her best to forget that she ever heard the name Rumpelstiltskin. At the bottom of that deep, dark chasm, Rumpelstiltskin awoke in an underground and secret world he had never seen before. The trees were even taller and greener than those on the surface, and there were all manner of colourful flowers that grew amid the grass, each of them strikingly different and gleaming with lustre. Rumpelstiltskin cried out with sorrow at the state of his affairs, having had yet another of his clever plans crumble to pieces. He fumed with extreme rage, twisting and turning, going over all the ways the queen would have guessed his name. He felt his heart beating briskly, and his face became so red like blood he prattled on about his misfortune so soundly that he awoke a very little and peaceful community living underground. They are called the Noms, and there were 20 of them at least, all laid back with smiles and laughter. They came out of their homes and circled him, looking curiously at this befuddled imp. One by one, each of them introduced themselves as simply Nom. Everyone knows, the smallest of them explained, but we Noms are known for our calm demeanour and stress-free lifestyle. Rumpelstiltskin knew of no such thing, since he has never met a Nom, but the claim appeared to be true, as far as he could see. "Why are you so upset?" they asked him, perplexed, for they knew of nothing but calm and play and rest throughout the day. "I didn't get my way," said Rumpelstiltskin, still anguished over his gamble gone wrong. The Noms tethered and fluttered about, baffled by the strange, frustrated visitor. "But there are so many ways to embrace the day," they chorused. The Noms started to play a friendly game. "First we fill our lungs like a big balloon," said one of them, as he began to draw a deep breath. Each of them followed, taking in an enormous deep breath as their bellies expanded like balloons. "Then we make the wind blow," said one of the Noms, and she bellowed out her breath, long and slow. The rest followed suit as they slowly exhaled. The Noms smiled wide and bright as they repeated the game, again and again, inhaling and exhaling. They were quite clearly in a state of sheer and utter calm, and Rumpelstiltskin became curious to join, so the peaceful Noms watched as he breathed in a full breath, feeling his belly like a balloon. Then he blew his breath out, steady and strong like steam from a kettle. A great success, encouraged the Noms. Rumpelstiltskin noticed that the storm clouds in his mind began to clear. His grumblings and grievances, they had faded away, with just a few deep breaths. But then intrusive thoughts began to creep into his mind again. Thoughts of the Queen's victory. His breathing reverted back to shallow little respirations, and his face reddened again with frustration. And suddenly he became aware of an ache in his back, crunched under his heavy rounded shoulders. "My back," he groaned, grumpy again. "How can I relax with so much discomfort?" "To help your back feel better, you must allow the earth to support you," sang the glittering Noms. They laid down upon the warm ground, spreading their legs and arms out wide, reaching out to one another like a rainbow latex. They pressed their shoulders into the sparkling ground beneath them. Rumpelstiltskin followed suit, reaching out his arms and allowing his chest to expand like wind blowing between his ribs. He held his chest forward to the sky and stretched out his tight stomach. His joints cracked and popped with his newfound freedom, letting out all the bad feelings from where they had been stored for so long. "That feels quite nice," admitted Rumpelstiltskin. Now that he was relaxed, he settled his hips into the nurturing ground, feeling his body grow weightless. His deep breaths filled his body, travelling across his muscles and into his bones. He could smell the salty sea, feel the glowing moon, and hear the sleepy stars. As he breathed deeply in and out again, waves of relaxation washed over his body from the curves of his ears through the tips of his fingers. Who knew, thought Rumpelstiltskin, that such relaxation was held in something as simple as the breath? "What is this wonderful feeling?" asked Rumpelstiltskin. "It's called meditation," one Nom briefly replied. "Isn't it wonderful?" Another added, "It helps your mind and body to be quiet and at peace." And Rumpelstiltskin knew what they said to be true. For once he saw the beauty of all that surrounded him, the wonder of the forest, the uniqueness of each of his new Nom friends. And the more he looked at them and at himself, the more he felt love for the world around him. And for the first time in his life, Rumpelstiltskin recognized that goodness lived within him. His angry heart had turned to gold. How beautiful the world is, Rumpelstiltskin thought, when it is filled with love and kindness. And when his thoughts returned once more to the Queen and his lost bet, he felt only a kind compassion cradling him like soft straw. Rumpelstiltskin was so inspired that he stayed in the underground for so many years, learning the ways of the Noms. He learned to focus on his breath and share loving kindness from his heart of gold. And when he was fully at peace and felt no more anger, he bid a goodbye to his forever friends, promising to come back as soon as he could. "Farewell, Rumpelstiltskin," echoed the tiny Noms. "Farewell." With his newfound peace, Rumpelstiltskin certainly did farewell. Back in his woodland home, he cleared out all the cobwebs and all the shiny trinkets he hauled over the years. Every reminder of his old life in the sad old times when he was unhappy and without hope. He resolved to never hold ill will, never to cheat or greed, and never again would he spin gold off straw or anything else, for the Noms had taught him the great honour of living for the day and earning his way. Rumpelstiltskin made his home spick and span, airy and bright, with nothing other than what he needed. He took away all his hunting traps and nets and replaced them with a lovely vegetable garden, filled with every kind of eatable plants you can imagine: purple cabbage, orange carrots, red beets, and dark leafy greens like a little patch of rainbow. He attended to his garden daily, growing the most delicious vegetables ever seen in the forest. The little woodland animals noticed this very quickly. They were no longer intimidated by Rumpelstiltskin and often came to visit him. The imp's home became a place of harmony. With his abundant harvest, he was able to take his crops to the market. So Rumpelstiltskin rode his wagon to town, filled with bushels of fresh farmed tomatoes, crisp green bean, and ripened squash. The little squirrels rode with him, and the busy birds circled his cart, their song inviting customers from far and wide. The town's market oohed and ahed at the quality of his offering, and he became quite the talk of the market. One day a handsome but scruffy young man arrived in the market and came upon Rumpelstiltskin's vegetable stand. As dashing as he might have been, his charm could hardly be seen through his furrowed brows, dirty face, and unpleasant scowl. The young man picked the biggest and brightest turnip, but after he paid, he ran away as soon as he had it in his hands. Rumpelstiltskin called out after him, "Thank you, and enjoy." The young man was gone in a flash of an eye. Well, Rumpelstiltskin's animal friends started chopping and squeaking like a symphony. They called out after the young man, shaking their wings and paws at him. When Rumpelstiltskin inspected his cart, lo and behold, he found several baskets of vegetables had disappeared. It was clear that the young man had made off with them. Dreadful, thought Rumpelstiltskin, who noticed himself growing a bit warm. His neck and face flashed pink as he thought about the deceit carried out against him. He fancied himself clever, but his pride was hurt by so brazen betrayal. That night, Rumpelstiltskin made sure to call upon his friends, the Noms. He could always rely upon them in challenging times. They gathered around the campfire just beyond the vegetable garden, and Rumpelstiltskin shared his story. They listened to his troubled tale and sprang to his aid. The Noms led Rumpelstiltskin in a game, the very one they had shared when he first tumbled down into the chasm. Altogether the Noms began to draw enormous breath and exhale slowly. Rumpelstiltskin joined them, breathing in and out, and before long he found himself once again calm and relaxed. He thanked his friends, and as he climbed into his little home to retire for the night, he once again glowed with peace and appreciation. As simple as it was, this was just what he needed. The next week at the market, the young man came to the stand again. This time the animals flapped and chopped as soon as he approached, but Rumpelstiltskin didn't pay them any mind. He made sure to breathe deeply while observing closely. He noticed that the young man's tattered clothing hung very loosely on his skinny bones, and he was not wearing any shoes on his dusty feet. "Hello there, my lad!" exclaimed Rumpelstiltskin warmly. "What a lovely afternoon!" The young man refused to exchange pleasantries with the little imp, always looking down at the ground in shame. But Rumpelstiltskin had set aside a basket of the most shiny and fresh vegetables. He presented the boy with the basket filled with food. The young man was taken back, to say the least. He did not know whether to run away or to hug Rumpelstiltskin. "No need to worry, my friend," assured the imp. He looked deeply into the young man's eyes, and as if those eyes were a mirror, Rumpelstiltskin saw himself as a young imp when he was fearful and greedy. He remembered back to a time when he too cheated people and stole their happiness away as his own. But Rumpelstiltskin was no longer the same person he had been as a young imp. As he reflected back on his transformation, his heart grew and grew with compassion. He recognized himself in this young man, and saw the young man in himself. "We all need a helping hand from time to time," he said. At this the young man's eyes were filled with tears of gratitude. Rumpelstiltskin patted the man on the back, but said no words. He merely sat with him in silence and listened, in case the young man desired to speak. Soon the young man's tongue loosened, and he recounted his tale of greed. "Forgive me, kind sir, for stealing is against my very nature, but my mother and I have fallen upon hard times." Rumpelstiltskin nodded in understanding. "My mother once lived in the palace, and we were happy at that time, because we had one another. But as the kingdom ran out of gold, the king asked my mother to make more by transforming it from straw. He claimed she had done so before as a young maiden many years ago, but of course she did not have the power to turn straw into gold. So she and I were sent away from the kingdom as a result, and life has been very different ever since." Upon hearing this story, tears rose from Rumpelstiltskin's eyes and ran down his wrinkled face. Rumpelstiltskin now knew that the mother of this dishevelled young man was the very maiden who had guessed his name those many moons ago. The little imp was overcome with remorse as he reflected back on how his actions had played a role in this young man's story. As he was overcome with emotions, he returned his attentions to this breath, to calm his mind once more. just as he had learned in his years underground with the Noms. By and by, as his mind cleared, he knew he must embrace the young man and confess his past mistake. "Alas, young man, I am not the one you should ask what to do, for I am, in fact, the cause of your troubles. Forgive me, but my name is the one that you may already know. My name is Rumpelstiltskin." The young man sat back, surprised as he could be by this revelation, and Rumpelstiltskin braced himself, expecting the worst. But no wrathful glare came, no furious words were spoken. Instead, the boy took Rumpelstiltskin's hand in his arm. "Thank you, sir," he said, "for helping my mother all those years ago, for she would surely have been killed had you not helped her turn those straws into gold. And thank you for allowing me to stay with my mother, whose love and kindness is the greatest I have ever known." Both men embraced, their hearts filled with compassion and understanding. And Rumpelstiltskin's heart grew so large and so full that he forgave not only the young man for stealing his food, but also himself for the ills he had caused when he was a young imp, who knew no better. Rumpelstiltskin smiled as he took a juicy red apple from his basket and gave it to the young man. He touched it 3 times, and with a sudden dazzle the apple turned into a lustre of gold, and the 3 kind souls, the maiden who is now a mother, the young man, and Rumpelstiltskin the imp, became a family of sort. They worked together in their garden and brought their bounty to harvest. They cared for the nature and the wildlife surrounding their home. They practiced loving kindness, and indeed they lived peacefully, joyfully, and happily ever after.